Hello, America, and welcome to the program. Tonight's episode, The Players, the Plot, the Problem. I'm going to talk a little bit about Joe Biden. We are going to get into the corruption of Joe Biden here in a minute, but first let's just touch on the creepiness issue. That's what the media has wanted to focus on lately, and don't get me wrong, there is a lot to focus on. There is, of course, this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. And I'm sure that's all plenty weird, you know, but there's also this one, and this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. So who hasn't been creeped out by Uncle Joe sneaking a deep whiff of somebody's hair, like in this one, or in this one, this one, this one, or this one? Now, I don't think that Harvey Weinstein has anything in common with Joe Biden. I don't think he's at that level of creepiness. But I also don't buy the excuse that, well, this one, this one, this one, or this one is just because that's the way we did things back in the old days. No, we didn't. No. Were you born in 1400? Ever since I've been alive, nobody came up and just started massaging people's faces that you didn't know. That was weird. I think weird probably even in the 1400s. Now, we could do this all day long because there is, of course, this one, this one, this one, and this one. But why waste the airtime? Joe's problem of keeping his hands to himself is not the biggest issue. There is also the laundry list of his controversies and consistency problems. Voila! Throughout Biden's political career, he has largely gotten a pass from the media because of the family tragedies that he's endured. And make no mistake about it, he has suffered heartbreaking personal loss. But some problems were just too big for even the media to overlook, like his plagiarizing a speech when he ran for president in 1988, or his stuff about making up his family history, saying, my ancestors, well, they were coal miners. No, they weren't. But none of that is what we should be focusing on. Not even this one, or this one, or this one, or that one. Wait, why focus on that? Because I wish it were only his handsiness and verbal gaffes and inconsistencies. But the media mostly looks the other way when it comes to Biden's true red flags. If Biden runs for president, the biggest concern for Americans will not be this one, or this one, or this one. Nope. It's what he did as vice president that made him the most corrupt vice president of all time. This is a complex story. We're going to attempt the biggest, most complex chalkboard we've ever done next. Getting to know Joe Biden, his long history, is very difficult, and very qualified journalists have spent years looking into it. We want to credit most of this information to two men, Peter Schweizer and also John Solomon. John was with the AP and the Washington Post for years. Credible journalist, and Peter Schweizer is as well. Now, who's Joe Biden? Well, you could sum him up as a family guy. Joe Biden and his younger son, Hunter, interviewed by Popular Mechanics magazine. And Hunter was asked, what's the best lesson your dad ever taught you? And he said that family comes first, over everything. He didn't have to teach it by saying it, it was just his actions. That, I think you will understand in about the next 16 minutes, is a massive understatement. The one thing you can never accuse Joe Biden of is his failing of taking care of his own. Joe Biden is a remarkable man with very, very powerful friends. In fact, one of his best friends, Joe Biden's best friends, is this man, John Kerry. Back in 2009, just in time for Biden to be sworn in as vice president, their sons, Hunter Biden, became very good friends with John Kerry's stepson, Christopher Hines. And they went into business together, and it was a lucrative business, it still is. They brought in a third partner, somebody that Hines went to school with at Yale. His name is Devin Archer. These are the players, the fathers and the son and the friend. Now, Devin had also co-chaired Kerry's campaign finance committee when he ran for president in 2004. The trio created some international investment private equity funds. Rosemont Capital was one of them. And they had several different branches. One was Rosemont Seneca Partners. And that branch actually was very, very important because it was right in between John Kerry's house and the vice presidential mansion. So it was pretty nice. And it's important to note here that everything I'm going to show you is fact, backed up with facts, footnoted all the way. But it doesn't prove a crime, because the U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act does not prevent foreign companies from hiring or making special deals with the children of U.S. government officials. This isn't a crime as it is grotesque. There is nothing necessarily illegal about the business deals I'm going to tell you about, even if the wheels of these deals were greased heavily by Joe Biden's interaction with the governments of Ukraine and China. I don't think we're going to make China today. But as you will see, this blurs the ethical line so much that you can't even make out the line anymore. So in other words, what Hunter Biden did may be technically legal. It's grotesque, and the vice president should never have allowed this on his watch, and certainly somebody who does this is as bad as anything the Clintons have done, and I think times 10 perhaps. But we're going to get back to Rosemont Capital and Rosemont Seneca a little later, but I need to introduce you to the partners. And boy, oh boy, when you put a company together, the company you keep is really important. So they made some partners in the Ukraine. Now these partners are kind of spooky, kids. The first one is a former Ukrainian government minister, Mykola Zolevsky. He's not really a good guy. The other one is Ihor Kolomovsky. Now, he heads a company himself. He's the head of this company. It's called Burisma. Now, this is the largest private natural gas company in all of the Ukraine. Zalewski created Burisma, but then through a complicated web of offshore dealings that we will get to a little later, this is common in the Ukraine, by the way, Burisma ended up being run by this guy. Now, he's such a shady oligarch. He has such a horrible reputation, such a violent reputation. We don't have enough time to cover him. Let's just tell you this. He's bad enough to not be able to get a visa. He can never enter the United States of America. This guy we care about. So, I have to take you now to February 14. These are the players and the partners. Here's the plot. And it all started in February of 2014 when Russia invaded Crimea. Do you remember this time? It was 2014. President Obama was president, and he decided to make Joe Biden his point man for the Ukraine, which really meant that Biden would be on the phone with Ukrainian leaders 2 or 3 times a month, and then he flew to Ukraine and he visited 5 times. So he's talking to these guys all the time between 2014 and 2017. In fact, Foreign Policy magazine says no one in the U.S. government has wielded more influence over Ukraine than Vice President Joe Biden. Now, that's true. Now, just a month after this happens, this guy, remember him? He's the friend, he's the guy who is part of this investment house. 1 month later, there is a meeting with Joe Biden, this guy, at the White House. Now, we don't know what the partner at Rosemont Seneca was doing at the White House and what they were meeting about. But I'm sure it was probably something just like cookies and had nothing to do with anything about the Ukraine. However, coincidentally, 5 days later, we had an event. 5 days later, Joe Biden arrives at the Ukraine to meet with all of the leaders. Now, this is a high-level meeting with Ukrainian officials, and he brought with him very specific plans. And these plans were going to guarantee and assist the Ukrainian natural gas industry with $1.8 billion. Now, this was something that would guarantee the stability of the Ukraine and help them with their energy. Part of the energy portion of the program reads, quote, U.S. technical experts will help Ukraine develop a public-private investment initiative to increase conventional gas production from existing fields to boost domestic energy supply. Well, you know what's weird is we had 5 days later the $1.8 billion. But what's really weird is we sent the experts in as well. Because do you remember Burisma, owned by this cat who's so bad he can't even come to America? Burisma, again, is the largest natural gas company. So they wanted a piece of the $1.8 billion, sure, but they needed some experts on how to figure out how to get that gas out of the ground. And so who is invited in? This guy, Hunter. No, I'm sorry, this is Devon. Devon is made a board member. Isn't that great? By the way, that happened the very next day after the $1.8 billion. Now, just 3 weeks later, somebody else, another expert from the United States arrives, to help them figure out how to pull gas out of the ground, Hunter Biden. Now, the combined experience on gas between these two is 0. But he was on the board, and he's still on the board. Burisma announced these appointments publicly. U.S. media reported on it, but it's no secret. Nobody really cared because it's the Obama White House and they can do no wrong. But there was a pattern here with Biden, and whether it's meetings with foreign leaders in Washington or traveling to foreign capitals, business opportunities and deals magically materialize for Hunter's companies. Isn't that weird? And just what kind of company was Hunter Biden and Devon Archer joining with this one? Well, Burisma, if I may say, was described by a journalist, James Stafford, who covers the energy industry. He said, quote, Burisma fails to pass the most basic due diligence check. Its registration documents are impossible to run down. It publishes no asset information or financial records, nor does it release any audited financial statements. The complete lack of transparency means that anyone interested, including potential investors, must rely solely on press releases about Burisma's future plans and intentions. In other words, it's exactly what you would think a very dangerous oligarch would set up. Now, Hunter Biden and Devon Archer joined Burisma, the board, coincidentally, right before the British government decided to freeze the assets of this guy. $23 million. He was the founder of Burisma. So they froze it. Now, 9 months later, the British government finally gave up and unfroze the accounts because they couldn't get the Iranian prosecutors to even cooperate. Gee, I wonder why. Now, after Hunter Biden joined the board, the company's owner, remember this guy? You know what's crazy? He was suddenly off the no entry to the U.S. ban. He could get visas all he wanted. He could come to the United States. Those all disappeared. He became, Captain America. He's fine. The visas disappeared, but there was something else that disappeared. Oh, yeah. The $1.8 billion loan. Where did it go? Well, that's the sticky wicket here. As the United States paid it, but we had to put it in to a bank. And, well, we had to put it into the biggest bank in the Ukraine. And so we did. It's owned by this guy. Well, guess what? Guess what? The $1.8 billion was no longer in the bank. It was just gone. It vanished. Where did it go? Well, a Ukrainian watchdog group traced the money, researching a series of court decisions, and said, oh, at least $1 billion from the U.S. was laundered through his offshore businesses. Now, ultimately, the Ukrainian government took control of that bank, but the $1.8 billion that you worked hard for and sent to our government, and Joe Biden laundered through his son and Burisma, well, we can't find that. Now, while his son was on the board of a company owned and operated by two of Ukraine's most notorious and corrupt oligarchs, Vice President Joe Biden preached against corruption in Ukraine. In a 2016 article in The Atlantic, and again in a 2018 speech, Joe Biden bragged about how he threatened to pull a $1 billion loan from the U.S. unless the president of the Ukraine would fire the general prosecutor. So Joe Biden makes a threat while his son is on this board. He says, I got to talk to the president because I want this man fired. The president, I'm pulling the money unless you fire this guy. But here's what's crazy. Joe Biden was Captain America, and he was tough on crime because they were being too soft on crime. Watch.
I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting $1 billion. I said, you're not getting $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here, and I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a bitch. Got fired.
He got fired. And he did. It happened just like that. He's gone, and a new guy comes in. Man, Joe Biden, thank you, Joe. Thank you, lunch bucket Joe, you're the best. Biden and his anti-corruption fight in the Ukraine got rid of this guy, I'll tell you that. Well, not quite. Now, according to award-winning investigative journalist John Solomon, Biden kind of leaves out a piece of this during his brag sessions. Solomon, who is currently the executive vice president of the Hill, interviewed 6 Ukrainian officials who now confirm Biden's threat. But they also confirm that at the same time this guy was fired, guess what he was looking into? This company. Isn't that weird? So he was looking into Burisma. Isn't that weird? For a wide-ranging corruption probe into the natural gas firm Burisma. Ukrainian officials told Solomon that Biden had to know about the investigation of Burisma because the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv, pronounced Kyiv if you are from Ukraine, repeatedly discussed it. After Biden bragged last year about his role in the firing, the new general prosecutor heard that and went, wait a minute. I remember all of this. I thought he had finished investigating it. No, it was shut down because of Joe Biden. According to Lysenko, part of the evidence includes payments from Burisma for consulting services. Oh, man. To that company. Who would have seen that one coming? Now, I want you to know, in a completely separate case in 2016, some more coincidences, which brings us to a problem. 2016, you remember this guy, the partner, right? Well, he looks a little different now. He was a fellow board member at Burisma. He was arrested in a separate scam for securities fraud. He was tried and convicted. He does look different. He looks more like this. Now, during his trial, financial records were revealed. These financial records, okay? These revealed that between April 14 and October 2015, Burisma paid $3 million. Guess who? Guess who? Guess who? To these guys. And guess what that means? That Burisma, every time a payment was made, there was a check written, and it got the paper trail. Crazy. A check was written to This guy. He's the son of, this guy. Lysenko told Solomon that he is now interested in sharing evidence of what's been going on with Burisma with our U.S. Attorney General William Barr. By the way, I don't want to besmirch a good man's name. Just 5 months after a jury convicted Devon Archer for security fraud, 7 were tried. Well, they all went to prison. He went to prison, but a federal judge has overturned his conviction. Only his. Just for Archer. The co-conspirators, yeah, they deserved it, not him. Something smells wrong. And even if everything that the Bidens did in Ukraine was completely legal, and that's a giant if, Hunter Biden was in a clear position to profit from policy and diplomacy that his father was in charge of. This whole thing, I mean, they were probably talking about cookies. Something's very wrong. The Bidens' activity in Ukraine, is that nuts or what? You haven't seen anything. Wait until you see what they did in China. You're not going to believe what they did in China. It's worse. Don't miss part 2. It's available only on blazetv.com/Glenn. That's blazetv.com/Glenn. Subscribe now and get the real story behind the Lunch Bucket Joe saga.